to wear, right? We'll look into that a little more later. But what I wanted to start with was a particular father who started it all, besides God. He used a human father, besides Adam. Move up a little bit in time. We're going to look at Genesis 22, verses 1 through 19. Because it's not just a particular father, but it's what that father did with his son, the relationship. And there's going to be a major parallel we're going to look at later. After these things, God tested Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and set it out, and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw a place far away. Did you catch that? On the 3rd day. Then Abraham said to the young men, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his back, on his son Isaac. And he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, Father, and he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So the 2 of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown them, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham looked up, and he saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place, The Lord will provide, as it is said to this day. On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will indeed bless you, and I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sand on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of their enemies. And by your offspring shall be all nations of the earth gain blessing for themselves, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham lived at Beersheba. Thus ends the reading. Thanks be to God.
3 feet tall and full of questions. You must have thought I was the smartest man alive, and I didn't have all the answers to every little how and where and why. Like, Daddy, why's the sky so blue today? Does Jesus really hear me when I pray? When I grow up, will I be just like you? Will I be tall and strong and brave? There is no power on earth always know you can depend on your Father's love.
Oh, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, and I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Because you are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. Oh, you're perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, it's love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so.
Well, we're looking at the story with Abraham and Isaac. Now, I don't know if you know the whole history of this, why this is so profound. Because Abraham, you have to realize that you have Adam and Eve, and then Cain killed Abel. And so until Seth, we don't hear a whole lot from Seth. What we hear is what happened with Cain, and then Noah, and the flood, and then started that all over again. So it isn't until Abraham that you have this break, this good news kind of a thing. But Abraham had grown up in a pagan culture. He was a Chaldean. In fact, his father was the high priest of the Chaldeans. And you know what they did? Well, it wasn't pretty. They did a lot of child sacrifice. And so when God calls Abraham out of nothing, Abraham had been praying for a son, and so had Sarah. They also had another practice that was, it was honoring the dead afterwards. You needed to have a cupbearer, and somebody, I don't know why they believed this, but they believed that after you died, that every year or month you had to have somebody come and fill a cup as a drink offering and a food offering, or else you would turn to dust. I hate to tell them, but that's kind of what happened anyway. But this was a thing. And so that's why they had, because if you didn't, this was like huge. If you didn't have an heir, you had to find one. And you had to pay someone in advance, hoping that they would carry on this tradition. So God calls Abraham out of this lifestyle, and he takes him to something new, a life in him. And it says he calls him, and then this is after Isaac has been born. He calls him before, and he tells him he's going to have a son, and that's when Sarah hears this, and she laughs. And, because they're what? They're in their 100. Oh, she's almost 100, and he's older than that. And they had there's a lot of story of Abraham before up to this point that's fun that you need to read. But anyway, so they have Isaac. They have also Ishmael. He was the first one, and he gets sent off. And so now it's just Abraham and Isaac. It's a dad and a son, and it's their story. But now you see something. A lot of people think Isaac was this little kid. No, he was about 21. So picture this. God tells Abraham, I want you to go and I want you to sacrifice. But what does he say? I want you to sacrifice your son. Now, for Christians in the 2000s, we're like, say what? That doesn't make any sense. But again, what was his background that he came from? That was what the little gods required. They wanted child sacrifice. And God is trying to show them at this time that he is different. Now, again, there has been a relationship established for years between God and Abraham. So this wasn't like he just talks to him out of the blue and asks him to do this. There had been a relationship. So what is it that Abraham says? He takes Isaac, he gets the wood, he gets the knife. Who carries it? Isaac, right? Abraham's old. He takes a couple of the guys with him, a couple of the servants. It says they went it wasn't just up the hill. It was what? A 3-day journey. They get to this part, and he leaves the 2 servants here. He's going to take his son on ahead to the hill that God said he would show him. And what does he tell the servants? We will be back. He doesn't say, I will be back. He says, we will be back. Hopeful thinking, trust. Because God had already told Abraham that from you and your offspring, you and Isaac, I am going to make a great nation. Now, if God's asking him to sacrifice his son, how's there going to be a great nation? He was clinging to that hope. He was clinging to that promise. God, again, had been working with him for over he'd been working with him for a lot of decades, but even since Isaac had been born, a couple decades, to trust. Why would God bring him this far and then take it all away? So they go up on the mountain, and this is Abraham is laying all the stuff down, the wood, and then he binds his son. Now, if you were Isaac, and your dad did that to you, I'm sure he said, I have questions. And then the next thing is, it doesn't say he lifted him up. Isaac got up on the altar and laid down. Let that soak in for just a minute. What son would trust their father that much that when it looked like he was about to take his life? Here's the difference. Abraham had raised Isaac from birth on into a relationship with God. Dads, if you were to even think of doing something, if God called you to do that with your own child, have you raised them and prepared them and taught them enough about a relationship with God that they trust you fully? Isaac did. Because Isaac asked him, he said, Dad, where's the, before he laid down, he goes, Dad, where's the sacrifice? And what does Abraham tell him? God will provide. He didn't say the joke's on you. Sorry, you're it. Didn't want to tell you before. He says God will provide. He still had that trust and he still had that hope. In fact, it got so far as him picking up the knife, but before he brought it down, God said what? Stop! The other thing that I love about this, when Isaac asked to his dad, well, I should say back up. When God asked Abraham to do this, Abraham said, here I am. When Abraham called his son to do this, and Isaac had a question, Abraham said, "Here I am." Both times. He was present. He was listening. He wasn't so preoccupied with what God told him to do that seemed so crazy and so absurd that he wasn't even listening to his son. He was still listening. And when God stopped him, he said, "Now I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you have chosen me over your past. You have chosen me over your family." Let me tell you, that did not go over well when Abraham left his father, and his father, as I said, was the high priest of the Chaldeans. Some crazy new age religion, you know? I'm sure his dad thought. He says, "Now I know." And then he goes on to reiterate the promise that he had already given him way back when. Your descendants are going to be like the stars in the sky. Can you count the stars? And like the sand on the seashore. Can you even begin to do that? No. There is more to this story than what a lot of people realize. This is the precursor to what God is about to do when he brings his son into the world. I want you to see the parallel right here. He asked Abraham to be willing to offer up his own son. So that means God had to be willing to offer up his own son. He would never ask us to do something he is not willing to do. The father brings his son on a donkey. Isn't that what Abraham did? To the land of the sacrifice. So then God would bring his son on what? A donkey on Palm Sunday. That's why Jesus rode, one of the other reasons that Jesus rode a donkey to the land of the sacrifice. The father places the wood of the sacrifice on his son's shoulders. Abraham gave that wood to Isaac as they climbed that mountain. God would place the wood of the sacrifice, the cross, on his son's shoulders as he started to make the trek up the mountain. Messiah, the Father lays the Son on the wood and binds him to it. And Messiah was laid on the wood cross, and he was bound to it. The Father lifts up the knife of the sacrifice, but is stopped. And so the knife, the judgment of God that is lifted up, it is not stopped. Messiah is killed on the wood of the sacrifice. But do you know what happens for the very first time in Scripture, from the beginning of Genesis till now? The word love. The word love is not mentioned until here. And it says, the love of the Father. That's what the whole Bible is about. It's about the love of not just a father, but our Father. The love of a Father who loves us so much, he was willing to do more than what he's ever asked us to ever do. The love of a Father who was willing to sacrifice his own son so that way we can be redeemed. You know, it is interesting. I know Kristen was working on a blog. You need to read it. You need to go on our website and read her newest blog. It's really good. I know it took months and months of working on this, but it was on love. God is love. But what does that really look like. It's real easy to have that cliche, God is love, right? That's all we need. God just loves you, so everyone's going to go to heaven. But that's not it. Did you notice what it said here? It was the judgment of God that was lifted up on the cross. Jesus said, I came into the world not to condemn it, but to save it. Now that doesn't mean that he didn't condemn things. It doesn't mean that unless you accept him that you're going to go to heaven. It means that he loves us so much that he was willing to lay down his life to make a way for each and every one of us to go to heaven and be reunited with our Father. That's a lot to swallow. That's really hard. In fact, I don't know if there was a story, oh gosh, I don't even know where I saw this. I don't even think it was on Facebook. I think it was before that. And it was trying to put in our earthly terms what God has done heavenly. Like, how do we even think about Abraham and Isaac? We don't even have that kind of a lifestyle anymore. So how do we possibly even relate? This was way before COVID, but it makes a little more sense now. I want you to think about if there was a time where there was a virus, a deadly virus, or a pandemic that swept through the world, and there was absolutely no cure. It was a fatal death sentence. What possibly could happen to save the world? Now imagine, if you would, that they're frantically, scientists are testing everybody and everything, trying to come up with something, some miracle cure, and they happen to test your son. And they find out that your son is the only one who has a certain antibody in its blood structure and its DNA that can actually make the antidote to cure the pandemic. But in order to do so, it would require sacrificing your son. That hits a little closer to home, doesn't it? What would you do? See, that is the story of God. We are all, because of sin, in a death sentence. There is no cure. It is fatal. No matter how much love, unless we accept that and his salvation, it's a death sentence. But knowing that, God did not want to leave us in that state. And so he was willing to shed his own son's blood for the cure, for the sacrifice, a way to provide for us to be reunited, to be made cleansed and whole. As you take communion today, we do this every week, but as you take communion today, I want you to think about that and let that soak in just a minute, a little more. When we lift up the cup, and Jesus says, this is my blood poured out. It was his blood that was the antidote to our sin, to our fatal condition that allows us a chance for redemption. So as you go about, I know that's kind of weighty and kind of heavy, but as you go about this Father's Day, just know that we're human. Every one of you guys are human. You're going to make mistakes and you're going to get it right, and you've got kids that adore you. And if you don't have children of your own, you have kids that are looking up to you, that are watching you and paying attention to everything you do and everything you say. I have seen it. I have seen kids even in this church running up to gentlemen. They look up to you so much. As a father, as a grandfather figure, somebody important in their life. just know that you have an even bigger father figure that you can look up to as well, who's got your back. Amen.